and a very warm welcome on behalf of the Museum of Art and Photography and the Bangalore International Center to this evening's session, The Provocateurs. Joining us in conversation today are internationally renowned artists and my very good friends, Gilbert and George. Having met as college students while studying sculpture at the St. Martin's School in 1967, our agent provocateurs have been creating art together ever since. The backdrop and inspiration for much of their art is the East End of London, where they have lived and created art together for nearly 50 years. Art for all is the belief that underpins their art. They feel that everything can be a potential subject for their art, and they have addressed many facets of human existence, including, but not definitely limited to, sex, religion, corruption, racial tension, addiction, and even death. In calling themselves living sculptures, they have made art and life inseparable. Therefore, every conversation, every encounter in their daily lives is art. I vividly recall bumping into them while walking in an underpass in Hong Kong about 11, 12 years ago. And I exclaimed, "Gilbert and George," to which they asked how I knew it was them. Of course, it was because of their matching ties and tweed, which, as you can see even today, is how they're always dressed in public. We got talking and decided to have breakfast together the next morning, which paved the way to our long friendship. And ever since, no single trip of mine to London is complete without lunching together. My deepest thanks, Gilbert and George, for agreeing to come on board for this map talk. And we are so very pleased to be the very first Indian institution to host you on our platform. I'd also like to thank Anand from Signable, who is our sign language interpreter for tonight's session. And a reminder to the audience to send in any questions you have through the Q&A box below. These will be picked up towards the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Shilpa Vijayakrishnan, who heads the education and outreach programming at MAP. And I'm as excited as all of you to learn more about their ever-expanding practice and distinctive style. I'm sorry I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Abhishek Podar, the director of MAP. Really looking forward to hearing both of you, Gilbert and George. Now, handing over to Gilbert.
A great introduction you gave us. Fantastic. We are charmed.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. And
good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Gilbert and George. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be in conversation with you both today. I do have a couple of images of your practice through the years, but before we look at some of it, I was hoping we could start with some of the broader questions.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask, you have been exploring sort of the fundamental themes of the human condition and have said that a lot of your practice is about pain. And I wanted to ask, has that changed at all in all these years?
We don't believe in change, we believe in evolution. We all know roughly what it's like when we were 5 years old and went to our first school, when you met the first love. So the evolution of our art is like the evolution of a human life.
It was quite exciting because I came from a totally different part of the world, from Italy, and moved very, very slowly towards Germany and towards England. And then I met George, and we studied together for 1 or 2 years, and then we were left outsiders. We were like ordinary tramps walking the streets of London, and we trying to make out without having a studio, without having anything. And we thought, what could we do? We could make ourselves the living sculpture in trying to walk the world forever. And all the subjects that are in front of us became art for us. It was extraordinary. It was an invention, the best invention that we ever did.
And when we emerged from art school and realized that around us in the East End of London, in Spitalfields, we were surrounded by tramps, people who were damaged by the First World War, very elderly gentlemen, Second World War, and people that were damaged by the prohibitive sexual laws. And we were amazed at the idea that the majority of people in our neighborhood were damaged people, disenfranchised people. All of those people have gone now, they've all passed away. And they've been replaced by a group of young disenfranchised people. And they're, of course, the drug addicts or the dope fiends. And all of those people feel some affinity with us. It's quite extraordinary. But it really started when leaving St. Martin's School of Art and walking the streets of London. We weren't like our contemporaries who were getting grants or getting part-time teaching jobs or applying for overseas things. We were alone, we were nothing. We had no money. We had one floor of this building. And we walked the streets of London and we marveled at the success of the Western world, of all the cinemas and the streets and the buses and the tubes and the prisons and the palaces and the libraries and the nightclubs and the ballet and the opera. And we were astounded by all of that. And we came to Euston Station, next to St. Pancras Station, this huge, people from all over the world pouring into these centers. And in one little street, we found a group of utopian houses with a lawn in front, very, very beautiful. And they had washing lines in the gardens. And on the top of the posts that supported the washing lines, there were beautiful ceramic birds by Royal Dalton. Every post had a different bird. And we were fascinated by that. And then we went to see the shops that the people who lived in those flats would go to. There was a tobacconist, a newsagent, there was a grocery shop, there was a place where you could wash clothes, washing machines, and a little shop that sold only secondhand things. all of the things you leave behind when you leave your flat, the unwanted chair, the unwanted lampshade. And we were fascinated by the detritus of human existence, all the unwanted things. And in that shop, we saw a pile of gramophone records, black gramophone records. And one had the title Underneath the Arches. And we understood that because the tramps around us were living underneath the arches of the railways. And we took the record home and we found some friends who had a machine that would play it. And we were amazed and fascinated by the words because it gave us a clue to the meaning and the future that we would share, that art had to have a meaning, a context, and a way, a moral dimension. And the words of the song were, "The Ritz I never sigh for, the Carlton they can keep. There's only one place that I know, and that is where I sleep. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away. Underneath the arches, on cobblestones we lay. Every night you'll find me, tired out and worn, happy when the daylight comes creeping, heralding the dawn, sleeping when it's raining, and sleeping when it's fine. La-dee-dee-dee-dee-da-da-da-da. Pavement is my pillow, no matter where we stray. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away. And in that moment, we had it. We had
In that moment,
the
we
secret.
found Gilbert and George.
The secret to art.
We found the
a
message.
human art, not an academic art, not a formalistic art, an art that can speak to people wherever they live in the world, whatever their educational backgrounds, whatever their financial situation, can still reach through. Because we believe that when we create our pictures, people always ask how we do them, it's very simple. We do them with our heads, our souls, and our sex. So it's feelings, thoughts, what we know, what we don't know, what we dread. And when people look at our pictures, they will unavoidably look at the pictures with their own thoughts and feelings and sexual drives. We can interpret them in the way that we would like them to be seen.
But firstly, thank you so much for that performance. That was wonderful. And I'm sure there are lots of smiles and perhaps some applause that we can't hear since this is an online event. But this was a great place to start because I did want to briefly talk about singing sculpture. And I had a image, if you just bear with me, I'll share my screen. And I just wanted to talk about the fact that this was something that you did more than once. And I wanted to ask if two things actually. One, was there a specific reason? Sorry, my apologies. There's a bit of an echo at my end.
Fine.
One, I just wanted,
Can you repeat the question?
yes. Was there a particular reason that you had decided to paint yourselves? And was there anything that you did different in each rendition of the time you did the singing sculpture?
No, it started out at the beginning that we did it in all the art schools, you know, because we wanted to go back to the art to say to them, we are still alive. We are not, we didn't disappear. So we used to do them for 2 minutes only. But one day somebody, Conrad Fisher, who was at the time the biggest dealer for modern art in the world, for younger artists, invited us to go to Düsseldorf to do the singing sculpture, or the living sculpture, you used to call it. And we went there, and by accident, the show was the whole day. So we started to do it at 10 o'clock in the morning until the evening, non-stop, up and down trail. And we wanted to remove ourselves from the viewer. And so we created this idea of multicolored heads to become a beautiful living sculpture. It was extraordinary, unbelievable. And it took over all Europe, all over Europe. We went to city to do underneath the arches. And then we took it to America, then we took it to Australia, then we took it even to Japan. It was extraordinary. And we feel we are still the living sculptors. We never change that. We are the center of our art, that's it.
The singing sculpture was the best introduction to the world that an artist could possibly have. We were very, very lucky in a way that we were living in the poorest part of London, so we had these tramps to have a thought about. We were only living here because it was the only part of London we could afford to live in. So it's always bad luck leads to good luck, and it's always been true in our case.
So I wanted to also ask you, when you talk about the fact that you are both the art and the artist, what has that really meant in terms of what does that entail for you?
I think it's mainly based on the moral dimension, because we believe, we tell all of our young friends who grumble about everything, we say we're living in the most privileged moment the world has ever known. There's more advantage, more achievement, more ability, more everything than ever before. And we believe that the artists are a huge part of that. Culture made us safe and free. If you look at the atlas and see the world on one page, reading from left to right, the only places in the world where you are safe and free are the democracies. So from left to right, we have North America, Europe, India, Australasia. You can be safe and free in those territories. In Latin America, you are in the hands of dictators and the church. In China or in Russia, you're at the hands of dictators. Not all, but most of Africa is in the hand of dictators. So being safe and free, we think, is partly a cultural invention. And we are part of that, to develop that, to see every day, every moment, how we can go forward, how we can advance that cause, that great cause.
I mean, for us, it's very simple. We are alone here. We don't believe in gods. We only believe in humanity. We only believe in the human person that is next to us. We never want to believe in artificial gods.
Right. So you have talked about the idea that all the world is an art gallery. So would you say that you see yourselves as, I mean, it's reminiscent of Shakespeare saying all the world is a stage. So would you see yourselves as sort of actors in this large, in this larger fabric of things, or do you see your role as change makers, or how would you describe it?
I think in that way, it's quite simple. We believe that if you are mugged on the street, you know where to get hold of the police. If you become ill, you know how to get hold of a doctor or hospital. Everything's very simple, but there is still an aching gap in life, which can only be served by music or poetry or thoughts or feelings or philosophy. And we are part of that. Art is also a service, we would say.
And what's quite exciting, because when we started out, so after the big success of the living sculpture, we had to create a form to leave something behind on the walls. First, we tried out to do very big drawings, explaining our loneliness, our walking through the woods, and how alone we were together, but the sky was still blue, and that was extraordinary. For a lot of people, it was amazing because they saw themselves in us. And that's why I started to love our art, because they saw themselves. We were not different than them. And then we started to find a new form through the negative form to create. In 1971, we did the first show, what you call the Krishnan 71, where we tried to find a new form making art.
Pictures.
We call them pictures. And it was very, very interesting. Then we started to be able to have the subject that are inside us. Then we had a little money. Then we started to go out and drinking. We got all drunk with all our friends, all exciting, all over England, East End of London. All the artists were all excited, drunk and all that. And we were able to use that subject to make amazing photo pieces. We used to call them that time, but now we call them sculpture. And so that evolved, like all what was inside, we emptied everything that was inside us on the walls of the shows or the walls of the galleries.
So I do want to show a couple of images from this early period.
What a good idea.
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
This is actually very interesting. So I wanted to, since you talked about having this form, right, and a visual language that you were developing, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, the grid that you've become so well known for, or the idea of multiple rectangular panels.
Yes, of course. This is a very rare picture. It's one of very, very few pictures which are not using a negative. It's just us in a dark room in the studio, posing against the white sheet of paper and switching the light on and off. So it's a photochromatic. There's no negative involved.
Oh.
And of course, the panels is very simple because we wanted to be able to make an art that we could travel very simply with. And like life is made up of years, and months and days and minutes. Every house is made up not of one brick, but of many bricks. So it's a very realistic idea to have it in sections. And we like it. It's a certain discipline. We can't do exactly what we want because of that.
And not only that, because it's paper, it's not canvas, it's paper. So we were at the beginning not able to, we didn't know how to find bigger sheets of paper. So we used to buy the small pieces of paper, but they have to be protected with glass or plexiglass. And so they have to be small. And so we had the idea to create a grid that we were able to combine together into a big what you call picture. A lot of pictures make one big one. And so we keep that because it's very easy to transport. We can transport a picture that is 20 meters long in 2 boxes.
I was also interested in the fact that some of these have, they're not just a large rectangular piece, but they're forming certain kinds of shapes. So there's this one, which is of course forms the shape of a glass, as aptly titled. But also this one where you have these 3 crosses. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
It's a very beautiful picture. It's one of the first pictures we showed with the drinking sculptures in New York, I believe, at the Sullivan Gallery. I'm not sure where that picture is now, but it's very beautiful. It's fantastic to see it after such. I think it's called The Secret Drinker.
Yeah.
That is also well.
But they are based on the crossing on the barrels of beer.
They're partly that, yes. The 3 crosses on the end of beer barrels.
But they're all based on drinking because at that time all the artists are big drinkers, no? But we thought, why shouldn't we make art about that subject?
It's a subject.
Extraordinary.
It is a subject. We are never looking for subjects really, because as we step out of our house, people think that we're artists who deal with the East End of London. Well, it's not really true, because as we step out of the house in the morning, we are stepping into a French street. Oh, that's a beautiful picture. Extraordinary. Cherry blossom.
Yes.
I think we began to be very interested in and use the bamboo because we used to go to the cinema clubs in Soho, which only had the Hong Kong movies. And we were fascinated by all these honorable monks doing very dangerous fighting. And then we found out that in Japan, cherry blossom is the same word or the same meaning as the first young soldier who goes forward and is the first to fall.
And we felt we were like that. We felt we were fighting for a new vision. We were fighting a new way of making art. We are fighting, even we felt we were the loneliness was extraordinary because we didn't fit in a certain art world. So we were able to create something completely different, but it was a big, what they call, madness for succeeding in that time. It was extraordinary.
Right. I did want to also ask about, this is a cherry blossom too again. So I also wanted to ask a little bit about the sort of symmetries and that you see, you know, with the posing and the left to right, even these images where it looks like they're coming together or going apart. And if that is something that you see still resonates for you today.
This is how we can use thought projection with images. You used to have thought projection in the theatres with the fake system for believing other, you could find out what people were thinking. But we think we can do that with pictures. We can have pictures and symmetries and colors that can transfer thoughts and feelings to the viewer, things that cannot be done with words alone. The fire in this one, for instance, is extraordinary.
So is the feeling you're trying to transfer one of violence here?
We're suggesting thoughts and feelings which the viewer can agree with or disagree or combine in some way. It's on a very simple case, if you read a detective novel, you can side with the police or the robbers. It's a picture for you to think about and feel whether it applies to you.
We never take an image of what they call of a landscape. Every artwork that we make is all the image that is inside ourselves.
Levels.
There are different levels that are in our brain. There is never a one image that what they call, a lot of artists, what they call, like Van Gogh, they take one image, they paint a landscape. We never did that. We always paint layers that are inside ourselves, what we feel like. Maybe here we have a hangover, I don't know. Or we're feeling that what they call life is burning outside. Life is not so good. We are already depressed because maybe we drink too much, all the stuff. So those are all feelings that are inside us. As every human being, when we gets up, he doesn't see a landscape very clear. He sees a landscape with all his emotions that are inside. Is he poor? Does he have money? What they call, is he in love? Or what they call, does he want to go away, disappear? These are all feelings that when you travel the world, you have inside. And that is part of our, always have to be part of our art. When we open the door of Fornia Street, how we feel that day. When a person walks in front of us, does he have a big rucksack now? Yes. So that all this emotion of living, death, hope, and fear that are always in something inside of us. How do we feel when we get up in the morning? That's extraordinary.
The human condition.
Yes, so you would say that emotion is what drives you to create art, but also what you hope will drive your viewers to experience your art.
Yes.
I think we feel very grateful for the people who paved the way for us to have a very privileged world, extraordinary world, but done with a huge amount of work and suffering. And people went to prison, people were executed for this modern world we live in, this extraordinary privilege. And we like to take that forward, to add to that. As we were saying, it is complex and it is wonderful when we step into the French street, Fournier Street, built on a Roman cemetery. We have an Anglican church at one end of the street. We have a mosque at the other end of the street. We have a Portuguese synagogue within 2 minutes walk. Everything is very complex and elaborate, and we like that. We think it's fantastic.
We have Liverpool Street Station.
The center of the universe. We can walk to the cemetery where William Blake is buried, where Daniel Defoe is buried, and where the writer of the most famous, least read book, Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, is also buried. But only William Blake gets flowers. It's very interesting.
But thank God for the enlightenment, when we are able to think for ourselves.
Step aside from religion.
Mm. So there's
become human and responsible.
I did want to also start here to talk briefly about color in your works, because that then I think moves. So, I mean, at this point, there are, I think, 2 deadboard images that I have here. Yeah. Where, of course, there's an absolute, it feels almost like it's been leached of color in a sense.
It's very simple because we didn't train as picture makers. We trained as sculptors. So we didn't have color. We started in black and white. The images were black and white. And then we found red. And then in 2 more years, we found yellow. And 4 more years, so we found color. We're not like the artists or the children or the amateur artist who starts with a box of colors. It's a very, very unique experience we had to find color for ourselves.
We try to find kind of what you call, we wanted to have meaning for colors. Even they are not completely perfect. No? But when we did this dead boards, well, they are not dead boards, are they?
Dusty corners,
dead boards, all the stuff, when we already became very lonely in our house, you see, we have this empty room, the floors, the ceiling, everything is falling into like a prison that we created for ourselves, a lonely prison that we never looked out. For years, we never walked the streets because we wanted to be inside our bubble.
So
dead boards. Those are the
yeah,
extraordinary.
Yeah,
the postcard. Dead boards is amazing.
Do you also want to maybe tell us a little bit about the boards themselves? Like you said, I mean, you mentioned that they were, of course, your house.
Dead boards. It's a very good story. When we had the first exhibition of dead boards in America, and before the show opened, we got the design for the invitation card and sent it over by courier. And they opened the envelope so fast and were so excited to find out they misread it. And they ran around the gallery saying, "My God, Gilbert and George coming with dead broads." Very American. But they're extremely beautiful, very lonely pictures. They explore a kind of loneliness which most people understand. Everyone's life has an element of loneliness, a large area or narrow area, but it is a line of human existence that everyone in the world can share.
The empty ball.
And it's very nice that we can explore it. I remember a gentleman stopped us who said that he'd bought a dead boards picture many years ago, and that it had been an enormous solace to him, comfort to him, when his wife had died. Now, we don't know exactly how that worked, but we were very pleased that it had some help for some extraordinary experience.
I think it's very simple. We are like everybody else.
Yes,
That's
and
why we speak.
I would
That's why we speak. The floorboards speak to people.
What does the funeral service say? Dust to dust, ashes to ashes.
No, it seems particularly poignant actually in our given time, where I think we've all been isolated, perhaps lonely, perhaps overwhelmed at different points in the last year and a half. So I do see what you mean about it having a certain sense of universal resonance.
Very good.
I also did want to briefly look at some of these Indian postcard works that you have.
Fantastic.
Yes,
looks like gold. Extraordinary.
These, of course, have a lot more color, so I was quite interested in that. And the fact that...
Oh, that's beautiful, amazing. It's a long time since we've looked at these.
They were all done in 1990, as far as I remember.
I imagine it's the
because we used to make we used to do this, photo pieces, and then we used to make every 3 or 4 years postcard pieces that we, finding the messages that we like in postcards, like war, lonely people, flowers, nature, landscape, and combine it into making a kind of multicolored composition. And then we started to see I think they were quite interested in the chakras when we did these ones in 1990. And we were able to we found landscape, humans, and what else, and churches and monuments and stuff like that.
It was very simple how it started, because we had a very nice gallery in London called Nigel Greenwood, and we had a show coming up with him of pictures, and then we had another person who was a friend of ours, who was an art dealer, and he was very, very unhappy and jealous that we didn't have an exhibition with him. And we said, we cannot have 2 exhibitions of pictures in London. So we did something different. We did some charcoal works for him. And then we had another friend who had a gallery. He became jealous. So we had to do a show, we had to think of another form. We had a show of pictures, a show of charcoal sculptures. And so for him, we started the first group of postcard pictures, which must have been in 1972 or something. And it was such a success, and it's such an interesting way for us to create that every so many years, we get together some pictures and make new ones. It's a second form of ours, and we like it very much.
And
we love it because we got all of these pictures of young Indian people in them. So it felt like where we live, because we live in what is now the Bangladesh district in London. So all of the people in these pictures look like all of our neighbors.
Ah.
And of course, they're all very famous in their own world. Yeah?
That's right. I'm sure there are a couple of members in the audience who might recognize these film stars.
Yes, I'm sure of that.
But I was
that's a beautiful one with the crystal, the red crystal. Amazing.
Yes, and I was fascinated also by the fact that there were so many of these. There's red crystal, red jacket, red scarf. Some of those are obvious, like he's wearing a red scarf. But I also was interested in just this kind of world building with color. Like there's red vest. This one is red. So
amazing. I think
was this more of an exploration of color that you were talking about earlier, where you were looking at meanings in color and the fact that you label or title these works such? Is that a reflection of that?
I think they're extraordinary pictures. It's a long time since we've looked at these.
They're a little small here because our screen is not very big.
They're very beautiful. They're very beautiful. Extraordinary.
I mean, the colors really started in 1980. Before that, we had black and white and red. I think red started in 75. And for 5 years, we did only black and white and red. But in 1980, we were able to combine blue, red, and green. And but they were all the colors at that time became like our kind of propaganda art, for ourselves, like with young people and what they call with what the sexuality combined with blue skies and loneliness. But young people were part of us because we realized we were part of them, and they were all beautiful. And
amazing one.
We were able to combine these amazing emotions of loneliness again in the people. No?
Extraordinary. Very nice to see them after so long.
I also wanted to ask, because in some of these where you're looking at the faces of people who, at least in some parts of the world, certainly here are rather well known, but also monumental architectural buildings that are very familiar. Is there something that you're trying to do when you sort of create these pieces that takes the familiar and somehow reframes it?
These worlds and windows are mainly made up of the human person, the man-made, and nature. These are the 3 elements.
The man-made could be like a mosque or
church,
a
castle,
motorway. Yes, stuff like that. And human person, we can have different, even politicians. We used to have a lot of actors because we were able to buy these kind of postcards. We didn't want to print special people. We just what we could actually buy.
Making art from what is there,
the
world around us.
Landscape came for where we come from, a lot of stuff.
I think.
Oh, beautiful, extraordinary, amazing. Lots of them.
There might be one more. Yeah, this might be all. I also wanted to ask you about, you've talked about art for all as being sort of the motto that underpins your practice for a very, very long time. And I also read somewhere where you said that for you all, the meaning of art for all actually has changed over time, or it's something that you're constantly rethinking or reassessing in terms of what it could mean. So I wanted to ask whether you can tell us a little bit about, over the years, what Afro has meant?
I think that we just became, especially now at this moment in our life, when we're both nearly 80 years old, and because of the pandemic, we feel incredibly privileged and very able. If we did a group of pictures, a huge group of pictures called the New Normal Pictures. And before long, the pandemic happened, and new normal became a normal term. And we had a show of those pictures in London, and then different ones in Paris, and then in New York with your lovely Indian elephants there. And then after that, we had another show of new pictures in Belgium. And at the same time, we have a huge museum show going on in Germany. So we feel very spoiled and very privileged in such difficult times. It's extraordinary how it all happened.
I mean, it's quite interesting because from the beginning, art for all, that we want to make art for people. So we had the idea that we wanted to make museum shows. No? We wanted to create the world of Gilbert and George. Every time we don't like to make small gallery shows. No, we have to make them for selling art for our vision. But our vision is big museum shows that you walk in the Gilbert and George world, where you see our subjects, what sexuality, what it calls landscape, what religion, all sex, money, and all the stuff is all there. And you create an extraordinary world, and you can go in and you can agree with it or run away from it, but it affects you. It is powerful art. This imagery is very much visually powerful made. That's why we were able to create a simple version of creating powerful images. The world of Gilbert and George. Even we did a film called The World of Gilbert and George. But now there's big shows like we did the Tate, we did the Pompidou, we did the Pompidou, we did in Italy and in Germany, House of Kunst, and now we did more than 100 museum shows. And that's extraordinary.
And now we're taking the art for all even further. We're just around the corner from us on Brick Lane in the Bangladesh district. We're building a foundation, a beautiful building which exists. It's an antique building with a very beautiful courtyard. We've designed the gates for it, and we will have a space there, three galleries, so that we can live forever. It'll be
so
anyone who comes to London from anywhere in the world knows that somewhere in London they can find some of our pictures.
Because we don't feel anymore the museums are doing the right job. They're all what they call fashion orientated, so they have no time for all the artists. Only certain woke artists are in now. So we will never be able to show in these big museums because they're always towards some fashionable stuff. And that's why we create our own space, that people can go in and feel it, real feeling it, what we do.
It will be finished later this year, and in the spring of next year, it will open. So we're competing with Abhishek.
Well, I see that Abhishek is very keen on asking when the world of Gilbert and George will travel to India so that we can get a chance to see it firsthand ourselves.
It would be exciting. We always wanted to do a show in India. And some years ago, we traveled to India. We went to Bombay for Christmas and New Delhi for New Year's Eve. And we tried to explore the possibilities of showing. At that time, it was more difficult. The conditions of the buildings was not so ideal. But we were like
the humidity was deteriorating the paper in the places that we went to see. So we were a little nervous.
But it was a very, very exciting trip. We stayed at the Taj in Bombay, and a very amusing story. They just had a revamp, and they'd fitted out in all of the corridors of the hotel a great suite of modern art pictures. I think they're done in a factory or something, but they were done in a certain style that looked like an artist that exists called Howard Hodgkin. And a friend of was with us took out his fountain pen and signed all the paintings in the hill, more than 100 paintings. And then the next day we came down for breakfast, and that artist was in the breakfast room. Extraordinary. And we love New Delhi. We stayed at, what's the hotel, the Imperial Hotel? The one thing we remember is that the head waiter was very young, wore beautiful makeup for dinner, but not for lunch. We always remember that.
Yes, we were quite excited by it. Extraordinary country, unbelievable. And we are very big fans of Lushins, who did all the big buildings in Delhi.
In New Delhi.
And the Indian buildings are extraordinary.
So
No, I think modern art became recently so big. Modern art is so global now. When we started out, it was only Europe and America, and maybe a little some shows in Australia. But now global art is all over.
yes, and technology, I believe, has a lot to also do with how much things get disseminated today. So I did want to ask about, you know, a little bit about the lockdown and how, you know, that might have affected your work. You did bring up the new normal pictures, and I do have some of them that I wanted to look at, but then
They came before the pandemic, strangely. Everyone sees something of the pandemic in them, but they were before. Let's see some.
yes, just
The new normal pictures.
I'm just gonna move a little further along. Yes, okay.
Art across the world is extraordinary.
Yes. So,
That's extraordinary.
so I
Balloon-
wanted to ask
balloon.
about the balloons, but also I think the first thing when you kind of look at them, all of these images, the first thing seems that they're really lurid in color and they kind of pop at you and they're really loud and sort of quirkily bizarre. But then the more you sort of look at them, the closer you look at them or the deeper you dig, it kind of feels like there's a lot going on. So I kind of was wondering about the balloons, which appear here, but also here.
Oxygen balloons.
The balloons in these pictures, because of the pandemic, became part of the respirators that were being used in all the hospitals all over the world. But that wasn't how they started in our pictures. They started in our pictures because a few years ago, we did the pictures called the scapegoating pictures, which had the gas cylinders for nitrous oxide, laughing gas. Because all around our neighborhood, every night there are parties with laughing gas. And they all use balloons for that. But when we did those pictures, we didn't want to include the balloons. We just wanted the bombs. And now we feel we can use the balloons. And of course, they did take on new meanings because of COVID-19. That's an extraordinary one in the pink. And these are the little bags which are on the street wherever you walk in London, especially in East London. You see, it says Marley Walk, Bob Marley.
Mhm.
Marley Walk is a real street, and that predates Bob Marley.
Right.
It's saddening is because you feel that young people are not satisfied just for living. They need something more. So all in front of our house, in the morning when we get up, you see all these little bags, leftovers.
And we love
On
it.
the
That,
drums.
we love that 3 are outside and 2 are behind bars.
Yeah, yeah. So this again is number 12. I understand that this is actually the doorway to your house.
That's
And
right.
this is the person you see in the image is somebody you know and interact with on a day-to-day basis.
It's a person we've known for many years. He comes more or less every day. He's called George Crompton, another George. And he comes from the north of England, from a very grand town, Durham. He was christened in Durham Cathedral. And he's I don't know how you would describe it. He's not a tramp exactly, but he's a unable person. But he's a very good person, a very happy person. And we became very fond of him. He comes regularly to see us.
He was here today, this morning.
He came this morning.
He walked, I think, 1.5 hours for a cup of coffee. So it takes us back to what when we see George, we realize we are quite normal.
He's thinking and feeling and has his moral issues the same as all of us, but leads a very, very different life.
So I was also
Priority
confused by
feed.
priority feed. Yeah. So what exactly is happening here? Is it that because it feels quite like things are unbalanced.
Here's our local bus stop. We do take buses from time to time. And you see it says SG kills. And we told all of our friends, and all of our friends said, how strange, SG kills. And we thought maybe it means some galleries kill. And somebody else said Serpentine Gallery kills. And then we found out it doesn't mean that. It means 5G kills, which is an entirely different thing.
But this is a bus stop. We used to walk every night to our restaurant, but now we are taking a bus every night. So I think George was quite exhausted that day.
It's not a true to life picture, but it is true to human condition picture. Exhaustion, everyone understands. Traveling, everyone understands. Taking a bus, everyone understands. We like to feel it's something that everyone can feel in some way.
So you talked about taking the bus to your favorite restaurant. So I just wanted to ask you about the fact that you have been frequenting, I understand you have like favorite cafes and places you've been frequenting for decades. And you seem therefore like creatures of habit, right? With the tweed suits and the same places that you go for lunch or for dinner or for breakfast. And yet your art is constantly about doing something new. Do you see that as something that is contradictory or paradoxical at all?
No, we don't feel that. We feel that the more organized we are in our life, how regimented we are, how crisp and clear and tidy we are, the more elaborate we can be with our making of pictures. I think that's always been the case with us. We need time to be free to explore, not time to go shopping or to be cleaning or doing things. We need our head free, like a huge desert laid out in front of us, in which we can create pictures.
Yes, we want an empty space in front of us. So we never, like own entire life, we never cooked. We never cleaned.
No car.
No
Holiday home.
No mobile phone. But so for 30 years, we used to go to a little cafe at the end of our street every single day in the morning and lunchtime. It was extraordinary, but then he retired. So now we found other ones that are just like that. And then we used to go to many times to Indian restaurants for years. Every night we used to go to the Indian restaurant. Then we moved to a Korean restaurant for maybe 10 years every night. And now we are going to Turkish restaurant every single night. So we are totally free people. We don't have to think only about making art. And we do a lot of art because all our art is made by us without assistance. We only have one helper, that Yui Gang that we found in Shanghai in 1993 by accident. And he became our big friend, and he's more important to us than our mother.
He's the chief of staff. He's the chief because he's the only one we've got.
And I think what's extraordinary that we are able technically in every way to create our feeling. We don't want any other person being part or creating that forceful images that we try to make. That's why we don't agree with all these artists with full of assistance. How can they make emotional art when they are not doing it?
I had one last question to wrap up before we turn to audience questions. So I wanted to ask about the use of language in your work, because there's a lot of punning that happens, like this work is part of your new 13 Earthly Pictures show, which I found, where it says barred, and then you have very obviously the bars, or this one that says lunged, where you seem to be lunging forward with something that looks like lungs or bits of lungs happening in the back.
You're right about that.
From the earliest day, we realized that we didn't want to be weird artists who did things like Untitled number 5. We found that was absolutely silly. You can't go into a bookshop and choose a book from untitled volumes. You can't have a packet of cigarettes without a brand name on it. And so we wanted to be normal and have a title for every picture. And it's very good. People can refer to a picture. Dead boards, dusty corners.
Yeah, and I was also intrigued by the fact that I read that you say that you don't really read a lot or believe in reading books, but a lot of your writing, from the of the vortex that I've been able to see, a lot of it is very poetic in nature. Is it really true that you don't read much or don't have writers that you'll actually enjoy?
I don't know who spread that rumor. No, that's not true.
No,
we read a lot, in fact. I get up at 5:30 every morning to read. I read a lot of history, and I like a lot of novels.
Newspapers, we read quite a lot. Yes.
But we
it's very
don't like reading menus. We think reading menus is very boring. So we order the same meal every night. We never look at the menu until one day we nearly vomit, and then we change the menu and go on for the next 3 months.
That's why we have been able to create amazing, fantastic titles in our work. Yeah, extraordinary. You know, no artist has titles like ours. You know, and we actually did the philosophy, you know, the big library, and the godology we did recently. So we are not so uninformed.
No, this one last question. Of course, you are present in a lot of your works. That is something that you are known for, and you're central to your artworks in that you are inserted into the work as part of that narrative. And I just wanted to ask, is this metaphorical? Is this meant to be autobiographical? Is it a mix of both?
We like to think that every picture we created is from us to the viewer. It's like a visual love letter from us to the viewer. Therefore, it always has to be by us and of us and signed by us. Every Dickens book is by Dickens. Every Van Gogh painting is a Van Gogh. Every quote from Oscar Wilde is Oscar Wilde. If you walk onto the streets of any city in the world and say Charles Dickens, even the people who never read a book, something of that man's life will come into their mind. It's a message from us to the viewer. But as long as we're here, we're speaking artists.
I think it's like everybody else, only that we made ourselves the center of the art. So walking through life to the end became our visual art. And we were able to express our emotions that are part of our life. So it is a journey towards the end. And it's extraordinary that we are able to do it without having to use anybody else's art.
We feel very privileged to be able to do that.
I'm going to quickly pick a couple of audience questions. So there's one from Indra Chandrasekhar, who says, oh, the intensity of color in the balloon pictures. How do you actually achieve that?
I don't think when we go to the studio, we never go with ideas. We go completely empty-headed, zonked, blind, deaf, and how we are inside at that moment, how we are this year, this month, that day, is how the picture has to be. We don't like the idea of thinking, what should we do in the studio today? That wouldn't work at all for us. It has to come out from inside of our life, from all of our life so far and today. So it's all of our life and what we're doing that day becomes that picture. It's a complicated thing in many ways. Next question.
Anjana Mangalgiri says that you say you live in the Bangladesh district and you've been mostly living in immigrant areas. Why live there? How does living in such areas inspire your art? And do you have any live interaction with the communities around you?
I think we first of all moved to the district because the only place we could afford to live. And at that time, it wasn't Muslim, it wasn't Bangladeshi. It was Yiddish speaking. There were people from Russia, from Poland, from Germany. They're all immigrants. And before that had been another group of immigrants.
The French, they were all the French here
This
because
street is French because the French people who didn't have the right religious idea were chucked out of France. So it was always a place of changing population.
It's quite exciting because in the 18th century street, built by the French, and then the Jewish people, then the what you call Bangladeshi, and then all the artist students who didn't have money to have a studio, they all ended up in Fournier Street in this place, and we ended up there as well. And it is a beautiful street, and everything changes because it is a cosmology. Everybody from different countries are here. It's not like living in a small country in England. It's a global center of London, and we love we love every human being who passes the street of London, and especially we love the waiters. We are very keen to be friendly to waiters.
One of life's secrets. We remember the first weeks when the Bangladesh people arrived in London and into this district, and they were alone. They didn't have families. They were just single men. And suddenly a cafe and another 2 cafes sprung up just for these people because they didn't have flats with a kitchen. They needed somewhere to eat. And so we went every evening to an Indian restaurant called the Clifton. And it was absolutely fantastic. We were the only white people there. It was us and the Bangladeshi single men, us and the police who came in every evening and took a free takeaway. And coming from the country and being a moral idiot, I thought, who should one telephone to report police corruption?
But it was quite exciting, but one was a Clifton, there was another one, and the other one more run down, where ordinary people used to eat. And we used to go there to eat, and halfway through dinner, the door was open and a tramp would come in and grab the food from the plate and leave. Just exciting. So it was quite an exciting period for us and very creative. And we still love it so much. It hasn't changed. It's just what you call changing every time in a different way, but it's all brilliant.
The owner
It's
of the
global.
global. The owner of the Clifton restaurant went to prison twice. And when he came out of prison, he discovered us, because he started to read newspapers in prison. And the only people he knew personally that he read about was us. And he said that he'd heard that we were artists and he would like to buy some of our art. And I said, well, it's a little expensive, really. Yeah? And he said, no, I would like to buy it. And he said, well, you probably wouldn't like it. It's very modern style art. And he said, I like very much modern expensive.
It certainly sounds like an exciting sort of atmosphere around. I did want to ask you, because you said that these were Indian restaurants or Bangladeshi restaurants that you were frequenting. If there was ever a favorite dish that either of you had?
Favorite dish?
I mean, we have the biryani, the chicken tikka,
Sagos,
all the paneer, and all stuff. You know it.
One last question.
Peshwari naan always.
Sorry?
Peshwari naan always.
I see, Peshwari naan, all right. There is a question from Shoshan Studios that says, considering that your body of work can shock and intrigue people, would you have any advice for young artists who might tread the path of political correctness?
Yes, we would say that a young artist who wants to find his way in life should, very importantly, tomorrow morning when he or she gets up, don't stand up, sit on the edge of the bed, keep your eyes closed and think, what do I want to say to the world today? And don't get up until they've found the answer to that question. And the second piece of advice to that person would be,
fuck the teachers.
I think that's
a very sound piece of advice, I promise you.
I think that's actually a lovely note for us to end on. That sort of brings us full circle. Thank you both so much for today's conversation.
You've been charming.
Yes, I only hope we had more time. I had actually a lot of other images that I wanted to look at, but I believe my hour is up, and I see Abhishek is also back on.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much. You were wonderful.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. Thank you, George, for starting with Underneath the Arches and your performance, which I've never heard live before. So we are privileged to have that. Sweet. And I actually had one question. How did you manage with food in the lockdown and in the pandemic, considering that your kitchen only consists of a coffee machine and 2 mugs?
It was terrible. We had to take all of the champagne out of the fridge and start to use it for food. Shocking.
I can't wait until you're going to show in India, and I hope you will choose MAP to do that.
The day will come.
We hope to see you very soon in London. We are going to show off our museum as well.
Absolutely. I'm coming before the opening and for the opening.
Try to come over for the opening, if not before.
I'll come for both.
Say hello to the family.
Thank you so much for doing this for us, and lovely to see you again, my friends.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.